Starting off, make sure you have Explore and Properties open. We'll find that by going to View and open Explore and Properties. Then go down into the description and get Dialog Kit v2.5. So once you've got the model, go to Toolbox, go to your inventory and search for Dialog. Then you should look for Azur's Dialog Kit. So we'll click on it, click OK. Now once you've inserted the model, you should be brought to these orange and blue parts. We're not going to be using the orange parts, we're going to be using the blue ones today. So what we can do is we can go into Explorer, click on the arrow for Dialog Kit v2.5, and then you can go ahead and read the documentation script, which is basically just this video if it was in text format. But if you'd like a visual representation of how things work with the system, what we can do is we'll go to Dialog Kit, which is the sound group, drag it into Sound Service, drag Dialog Kit, the Screen GUI, into Star GUI, drag Dialog Prompts into Workspace, and then we're just going to keep this here. After that, delete Dialog Kit v2, but keep Dialog Kit v2.5. Now we should be left with this blue part. Let's go drag this somewhere on the map, just somewhere where we can remember it. I'm going to put it right here. So for this tutorial, I want to make a NPC dialogue, another NPC dialogue, and then an interactive dialogue. To do that, we'll go to Avatar, Rig Builder. I'm going to change it to R6, and I'm going to insert a block avatar. Then I'm going to drag this rig just right here. Then we'll drag our blue part over here, rotate it, and then we'll move it to around his torso. This should be a good position. This part is optional, so you can skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to do this, but I'm just going to create a quick animation for my rig. I'm not going to go into depth of how to make the animation, because that's not my thing, but you should already know how to use the animation editor. Alright, I've created my animation, so I'm just going to go ahead and export it. So now I just want to load this animation that I've just made onto the rig. So I'll insert a script into the rig. Then inside the script, I'll click on the plus and I'll insert an animation. Then I'll put in the animation ID into this property right here. Then we'll do local animation equals script.animation. Then we'll do script.parent.humanoid.animator load animation. And then we'll put in animation play. It should look like this. Make sure your animation is looped, otherwise it won't work. And then in game it should look something like this, which is perfect. After that you can go into dialog prompts. There should be this little cleanup script. And if you enable this little blue box will disappear in game when you test it out. And it will just be the proximity prompt. Now let's actually create a dialogue. We'll go over to Dialog Kit, the Screen GUI, click on the arrow for dialog storage, and then we'll open test prompt. You should be introduced to this script. It's a bit overwhelming when you're first looking at it, but I'll tell you how everything works. So first off, we have Dialog Kit module and dialog prompt. Dialog Kit module is basically referring to this module script in the properties, and dialog prompt is referring to the test prompt, which is under dialog prompts, which is under workspace. So basically what this does is, when the dialog prompt is triggered, it runs this function right here called create dialog from the module, and then this is where our dialog is created. So we'll go from top to bottom, and then our dialog should automatically work. We'll start off with initial layer. As you can see, there is a layers table. If I open this up, you can see I have layer 1 and layer 2. This should be the name of the layer you want to start on. I'll get more into layers later, but this is what you should know first. Skin name, we'll also be talking about skin name later, so we can ignore this. And config is basically just the settings of the dialog. If you open the arrow underneath test prompt, you'll see that config is right here, and then a bunch of settings are over here as well. I'll be going over the settings after, but first I want to actually edit the dialog text. So going into layer 1, we have a dialog dictionary or table, I think it is. And we have some text already inside, but we just want to clear this out first. So what we'll do is we can do quotation marks or what these are. Then in between these we can write some text, so we can say hello. And if I want to refer to the username of the player, we can do .game.players.localplayer.name . So basically what this does is it says hello player name. Then if you put a comma at the end, make a new line, This will be the next piece of content after the player clicks the continue button on the dialogue. So I can say, how are you? So I'm just going to keep it as this. Of course, you can make this as long as you want, but this is a tutorial, so I don't want to make it too long. Next up is dialogue sounds. This is basically for voice acting. So basically what this is right here, you see nil, nil. So there's currently no sound, but if I just put like a random sound ID right here, this one will play when it says hello player name, and then this other nil will play when this is shown. And if you have free, like if I just put something random here, you'll have to put a new comma and then the next ID for dialogue sounds. That's basically how the dialogue sounds works. Make sure you have comments after everything as well. Next is dialogue image. This is basically the image that shows on your dialogue. So currently it's set to a default. I'm going to keep it as a default, but you can set this to a profile picture of the NPC maybe, or you can just set this to something random. Next is the title. The title is basically just the text that shows at the top, so this could be the name of the NPC. So I'm just going to name this Ray NPC. And after that are all the replies. But since we've configured these three settings on the first layer, we can go ahead and playtest this out. And if you've inserted everything correctly, if we go over to our noob over here, and we'll hold E to interact, we can see hello as a GIF, and we can click anywhere to continue. How are you? And then our replies show up. So let's go on to replies. So going back into our test prompt, first off we have the reply 1. So basically what this is, this was the first reply that showed up on the bottom left, and then if we click that reply, it sends us to layer 2. As you can see, if we see reply layer, goes all the way down here to layer 2. So I can change the reply text. This is basically what is displayed. I'll say I'm good, and then we don't need to change this unless we change the name of the layer. We can just name this like I'm good layer, and we will change reply layer to I'm good layer. Then there's this goodbye button. If anything in the replies is named _goodbye, it will always mean that it is a goodbye button. So we don't need to use reply layer. We just need to change the reply text to whatever you want, and it will always close the dialogue after you click the goodbye button. Then we have Exec. Exec will be towards the end of the video, so we're not going to go over this yet. So we'll go straight down to I'm good layer, and then we'll change the dialogue right here. Now here's another thing that we can do as well. As you can see, if we put in dialogue, you can see that I put that is great, and then I am. So instead we could just do I'm, but as you can see that kind of causes a bit of an error. So how do we write this character inside of the dialogue? Well, that's not what I'm going to tell you now. If we go over to the dialogue hint module, and then we'll just scroll down until we find a bunch of strings of text right here. Like here, we can see the apostrophe. We'll copy the apostrophe, which is and, apos, and a semicolon. Then we'll go back to our test prompt, and then we'll just paste this in. So I, this thing, then M. Then this should write I'm. And then we can go to that is great, and we can do that, this, and then S, and then that means that. Now everything else is also the same, but this is basically if you want to make it seem like you're having multiple conversations between each NPC. So we'll have to match dialogue image and dialogue title. So I'll have to change this to gray NPC so it doesn't change. And if you change the dialogue image, but I didn't, so I don't need to do that. But if you have changed it, copy it from layer 1, then paste it into layer 2, or if you're having a good conversation with a different NPC, change the dialogue image, and then change the title to, let's say, pink NPC. And then everything else is the same as the layer 1. We have the replies and the exec, but if there's no replies, then after the player clicks continue after seeing this piece of dialogue, the dialogue will end. So we can go ahead and playtest this. So we'll go over to our NPC, interact with it, hello as a GIF from gray NPC. I'll click anywhere to continue. How are you? I'll reply with I'm good. And then we'll say, that's great, I'm glad you're doing well. Then we'll click anywhere to continue, and the dialogue ends. We can do this as many times as we want. We can try the goodbye button, and it just ends the dialogue. So next, before we move on to anything, let's go through the config. So if you remember from earlier, there's this little configuration file called config underneath test prompt. Then it has a bunch of settings inside of here. I'm going to explain every single setting to you. So first off is background sound. Basically what this is, when the dialogue is open, you can play some music in the background. That's literally it. So you can put in the sound ID as the value, and then you can change some of the settings right here. Then we have cinematic bars. This basically just adds 2 cinematic bars that comes from the top and the bottom, and then disappears when the dialogue ends. There's also an extra option called tween bars. So if you don't want the bars to tween in from top to bottom, you can just make them easily pop in. Next is the continue button. This lets you configure some stuff based around the continue button. So basically, if we enable visible during typewriter and functional during typewriter, basically if the player clicks during the continue button, then it will automatically paste the dialogue in without the typewriter having to write it in. You can also disable the typewriter, but we'll be going on to that in a bit. There's also visible during reply, which makes the continue button visible when replies are visible. I don't see any use for this, but if you want to do it, go for it. Then we have core GUI. This is basically what core GUIs are enabled during the dialogue. So by default, the chat and the leaderboard are enabled and the backpack is disabled. But you can disable the chat and the leaderboard if you don't want those being in the way of your dialogue. Then we have dialogue camera. Basically what this does is if we insert a part right here and then we point it at one of our rigs, I'll anchor it. If I do dialogue camera, click on the value and then set it to this part, when I start this dialogue, it will reset my camera to this part. Next is dialogue walk speed. This is basically the walk speed inside the dialogue. By default it's 0 and the default walk speed is 16, but if you have a custom default walk speed, you'll have to say right here. And if you want the dialogue to just keep your walk speed as normal, we'll just do -1. Or if you want to have a custom walk speed during the dialogue, just set it to whatever you want. Next is key code. Basically what this does is if you don't want to click the continue button, you can press enter or return to act as a continue button press. You can also do this for the replies, which is reply 1, reply 2, reply 3, and reply 4, because there's only a maximum of 4 replies on each dialogue. There's also some buttons for gamepad, so we have button 1, X, Y, B, and A, and if you don't want to have a button assigned, you can just set it to nothing. Next is player dead, and basically what this does is it just has some settings where if the player is dead, then it stops the dialogue. I would keep this on. But there's also interact when dead. This basically means they can open this, basically like start the dialogue when they are dead. But I want to keep this disabled because I don't want people dying, then enabling my dialogue. Next is rich text. This is on by default. And if you know anything about Roblox's rich text, you can use rich text in Dialogue Kit v2.5. I'm not going to go through rich text in this video, but I'll put a link in the description on how to use rich text. But if you don't want to use rich text, just go ahead and disable it. It doesn't do much, it just makes the text have rich text disabled. But yeah. And then finally we have typewriter. Basically what this does is, if you set the value to true or false, if this is false, then the text will instantly pop in. But if it's true, then the text will write out like a typewriter. There's also some extra settings called sound and then speed. So basically what sound does is whenever a letter is typed out, it plays a sound. So you can turn that option on if you're making something like, you know, like Undertale. That's my only example I can think of. And we have the pitch, so you can change the pitch of the typewriter. Then we have speed. This is basically how fast each letter is written. So you can set this to 1, so then 1 letter is typed out every second, but I would definitely keep this at 0.01 or 0.02, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range. Then we have speed special. Speed special is basically the speed at which special characters are typed out, like a point, comma, semicolon, colon, quotation mark, all that. I would keep this at 0.5, but if you want the special characters to be typed out a bit faster, you can set it to something like 0.1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to keep it at 0.5. So you can go ahead and play around with these settings if you want, now that you know what they do. And then come back here, and then we'll move on. Alright, moving on, let's make a second dialogue. So I'm just going to clone our current rig, so I'll duplicate him, move him over here, and then I'll make him pink. Then we can go back to our blue part over here, click on it, duplicate it, and then put him over to our pink guy over here. Then go to dialog prompts, and then set test prompt 1 to whatever you want to name it. So I'm just going to name it pink guy. And then once we've done that, go to dialog storage, or pretty much anywhere that holds a local script. Click the plus, and insert a local script. We'll name this pink guy. Then we'll remove this print, then we'll do local dialog kit module equals script.parent.parent.dialog kit module, and then we'll copy this to require and then paste it in right here. Then we'll do local dialog prompt equals workspace colon wait for child dialog prompts dot pink guy dot prompt part dot proximity prompt. Then we'll do dialog prompt dot triggered colon connect function, and then it should look something like this. Then we'll go up here, we'll go to dialog kit, which is this folder that we left out. We'll go into documentation, scroll down, and then we're going to copy this right here. And we're going to paste it into our triggered, and then this is basically just a completely clean version of a dialog. So starting off, we have our initial layer, our skin name, our config, and then we have the layer right here. So I'm going to start off with layer 1, and I'm going to quickly configure it to my liking. Alright then, so I've created my dialog. So we start off with layer 1. The dialog says, hey you, have you seen that gray guy anywhere? He's really lame. If you can find him, please let me know. Then we have 3 replies this time. I forgot to mention, if you want to create another reply, just copy this, make 2 new lines, paste it in, and then change the name of the reply to something memorable. But I just changed the reply to. Then we have the 2 options, which is okay, and I know where he is, and then we have the goodbye button. Then layer 2 just says, you better. And then reply 2, which is I know where he is. It just says, really? Please tell me where he is. And then the only reply is, I don't think I will. But in this, I want to have a different skin, and I want to have a different config. So basically what a skin is, it basically just takes the default UI, and then gives it a makeover, and then it's brand new. So there should be 2 skins automatically installed. So if I go into here, if I change skin name to default light, it will automatically work. But we need a config. So if we go over to dialog kit v2.5 and duplicate default config, and then put it under pink guy, and then we'll go over to config inside of create dialog, and we'll change script.config to script.defaultconfig. You can change the name of this config file to whatever you want, as long as you don't change the name of any of the settings. But I don't want to use default light. I want to use a different skin. So if we go back to the dialog kit v2.5 folder, there should be a skins folder. I'll click on this arrow, and then we have a few skins to select from. There may be more, but it will be the exact same to install. You can see a showcase of some of the skins in the description, but I want to use the hotline skin. So I'll click on the arrow, and I'll drag the hotline frame into skins, and I'll drag the hotline config under pink guy. I'll remove the other config. Then in config, I'll change script.defaultconfig to script.hotlineconfig, and I'll change skin name to hotline. And now my dialog should be all ready to go. I have my replies, I have my 3 layers. Let's go ahead and test it out. So now that we're in the game, I'm going to enter with the pink guy. And as you can see, the skin has been completely refurbished to the hotline skin. And our dialog says, hey you, have you seen that gray guy anywhere? And we can click here. He's really lame. If you can find him, please let me know. And then we have our 3 replies here. This is basically just to layer 2. And then it just ends. But we can also choose the second prompt, which is I know where he is. And then we'll write, really? Please tell me where he is. And then the final reply is I don't think I will. So that is also how you make a chain of replies and layers. And it's also how you import a custom dialog skin. I'm not gonna go into how to make your own dialog skin in this video, but that'll have to be for another time. So basically, we're done with creating NPC dialogues. What I want to do now is, though, I want to create a interactive dialogue. This is just the same as a normal dialogue, but we're going to be using Exec this time. So I'm going to duplicate our test prompt 1. I'm just going to rename this to test prompt 2. I'm going to drag it over here, and then I'm going to make 2 doors right here. So I've got a blue and red door, and then we have the prompt in the center. So I'm gonna go down here, and this time I'm gonna duplicate test prompt, and I want to use a different config and different skin. You don't have to do this, you can use whatever skin you want again, but I'm going to be using the interactive skin. So I'm gonna drag interactive into skins, and I'm gonna drag interactive config into this other test prompt. I'm gonna name this test prompt red and blue door, and then I'm gonna change skin name to interactive. I'm gonna change config to script.interactive config. For this, we don't need to use dialog image or dialog title because they don't do anything in an interactive dialog. Because I don't do anything in the interactive skin, it's only the dialog itself and the replies. Those are the only things that we want to do, and then we have our exec. So in this, I don't want to have a second layer, so we can remove this. And the reply layer, I'm just going to set this to nil. And then I'm going to duplicate reply 1, and I'm going to remove the goodbye button this time, and name this reply 2. And for this, I want to change I'm good to blue door, and then the other one to red door. And make sure we change test prompt 1 to test prompt 2, or to the name that you've chosen for your dialog prompt. And in our dialog, I'm just going to put which door do you want to open. And then outside of this, I'm going to make 2 new lines and do function blue door. So it should look something like this. I'm going to do workspace.blue.transparency equals 1. Then workspace.blue.canCollide equals false. Then I'm just going to copy these 2 lines, make 2 new ones, and I'm going to change this to red. And I'm going to make it 0 and true. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it in, and then I'm going to change this to red door. We'll swap these around, and there we go. Now, let's just remove these 2 things from exec, and then we'll be left with this right here. So I want to copy this, and then I'll paste it again down here. So I want to rename this to blue door. This is basically the same as naming the replies, red door. And then basically what I want to do is inside a function, remove this, and then we'll write blue door. And then as you can see at the ends, remove these brackets. And then for the red door, we'll do red door. It should look something like this. Make sure there's no brackets at the end, otherwise it won't work. So basically exec time, this is for another thing I'm not going to explain in this video, but if you read the comments on this here, you'll know what exec time does. But all I want to do is I want to change exec content to reply 1 for the blue door, and I'm just going to keep it to reply 2 for the red door. Basically what this will do is when reply 1, aka blue door, is clicked, it will run the blue door function, which changes the transparency and the collision of the blue door to false and makes it transparent. And it also does the same for the red door, but it does the same as the blue door, but opposite. And now we can just go ahead and playtest this. So once we're in the game, I'm going to hold E to interact. Which door do you want to open? I want to open the blue door. Then it opens the blue door. If I interact to it again, now I select the red door, the blue door closes and the red door opens. Now, so that is all I have for explaining DialogKit v2.5 in this video. It is the update to DialogKit v2, which is basically just giving it a lot more features. So thank you for watching. This is all I have for this video. I will probably do another video for some more advanced things, but that is how you create the simple dialogue, the NPC dialogue, and the interactive dialogue. You've learned how to make the dialogue, you've learned how to set the skins, you've learned how to set the config, and in another tutorial I will show you how to make your own custom dialogue skin. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.